Today, really excited to have Tiarna Mccormack on. Thank you so much for coming on the counter offer, Tiarna.
Thank you so much for having me. To say excited is an understatement at this stage. I'm really looking forward to being here with you. And for the first time, seeing you face to face, we speak so regularly and it feels like I know you. But to actually be here looking at you speaking is a whole new level of excitement for me. So thank you for having me on your show. I'm very, very much grateful.
Awesome. Well, so happy to have you. And yeah, thank you for putting yourself outside the comfort zone because this is, I believe, your first podcast. Is that correct?
It is. It is. It's been on my to-do list and bucket list, let's call it, for a long time. But it's one of those things where I'm like, I'll get there. I'll get there. And then I thought, when you said, let's do it, let's do it. I was like, yes, let's just grab it and do it and go for it. So this is my first time. But yeah, I'm ready for it.
I love it. I love it. And what's really funny, it takes me back to my first podcast episode. I remember I had to have a glass of wine. Not that I'm an alcoholic or anything, but I needed that wine to give me the confidence. So I love it that it's in the middle of the day and you have no wine and you're doing this through pure confidence. So
Not that you know of.
yeah,
No, I'm just
not that I know
there's
of.
no
I know
wine.
underneath your desk. But one thing that I will say is I've done you a small introduction, but can you tell our listeners who you are and how you came into doing Rec to Rec?
Yeah. Okay. So as you can hear from my accent, I'm Australian. I'm born and bred in a place called Brisbane in Australia that I'm sure you all know of and would know of. I think it's probably important that I go back a little bit with my story and how I got into Rec to Rec, because we speak to people all day, every day about how they got into recruitment. I think there's a common theme of people just like landed in recruitment or recruitment found them and they fell into it. I was slightly different. I gravitated towards recruitment and found it because I wanted to move into recruitment. It was something that I've always, always, always had a dream and desire to be in at some stage, but I didn't quite know it. So my sales career started in Flight Centre, if you can believe it, back in the day where people actually used to walk into a travel agency and book their dream holiday.
Nice
So
job.
it was really exciting. It was probably one of the most exciting jobs in the world because I got to sell travel for people. And I think any sales job has its ups and downs, that when you're selling something that you're passionate about, it helps. I was managing a big hyperstore in the city of Brisbane. And I think that's really what sparked my interest and desire to go on a sales journey and really ultimately learn the fundamentals of the sales cycle. So I was really successful in working with inspiring leaders that taught me, I think, everything I know and I still use now, even 15 years later in recruitment, which I'll get to. I started in travel, loved it, got to travel the world. And I think that's where I really got the taste of working in an environment that is commission-based and super high energy, fast-paced, constantly chasing targets, constantly trying to secure the best holiday for your clients, candidates, working with different sorts of partners. That's started when I was really young, really. And then my life kind of pivoted and went on different journeys, I suppose, which was, we'll get to where I am right now. And I was very lucky back in the day. Working remotely wasn't a thing 10, 11 years ago. It was very uncommon, which, we're all up against this topic now daily in what we do. And my job at Flight Centre, they were like, look, go and travel, take 6 months off, have a sabbatical. The more countries you see, the more you can sell them, the better you're going to be at your job. And I was like,
Wow.
how lucky am I? And I was really lucky. I ended up extending it to 12 months and I spent 12 months backpacking around Central South America, meeting really amazing, cool people. The plan was come back in, make my way up the ranks, become VP, stay in my corporate job and become head of sales for Australia. That's what I thought. How wrong I was. I was so wrong.
Really? Why? What happened?
So wrong. I got back to Australia, and as you know, we are like this huge island in the middle of nowhere. We're isolated, right? I think when you travel the world and you meet people from all different parts of the world, different cultures, you have different interactions. Nothing really changed in Australia, but I think I changed, and I got back and I started working my job again and was like, hold on a minute. I've got this burning desire to keep traveling and moving and to be somewhere else. And I wasn't really satisfied in Australia. So
got the bug.
I got the bug, the travel bug, right? You got the bug. Okay. So you can relate to the bug. It stays, it sticks with you, doesn't it? And it's like you try and bury it a little bit because you're like, no, hold on. I've got my friends, my family here. Things are going really well here, but it was just this burning desire. So anyways, I listened to it and I moved actually to the Netherlands. My grandmother was born in Holland, so there was always a need for me to gravitate towards the Dutch. And I love the Dutch. And I spent 7 years living in Holland, and the way they operate, the way that they do business, the way that they live in society is just really refreshing. And I was working there remotely, working for Flight Centre, still thinking I'm going to live this travel dream. And I think the biggest competitor at that time was the internet, right? So I was up against the internet. And as we know, the internet moves faster than the speed of light at times. And the only thing you could do really well in a sales role was be really customer centric and deliver a really good level of service, which is what I tried to continue to do. It got tricky doing that from the Netherlands, working in Australia. I was like, okay, this is not going to work long term. So the future of travel was online, and as it is now and as it continues to be, and Booking.com's headquarters was actually in the Netherlands. So I made it my mission to get myself in front of one of the hiring managers at Booking.com. And I was like, you need to hire me. I want to stay living in this country. I want to work here. It's only going to be for a year in my mind. How wrong I was again. It was 7 years later. I stayed there and I stayed working at Booking.com for 4 and a bit years and then moved into the startup scale up world. And I think throughout my whole career of working within Booking, I was always involved with people management, optimizing recruitment processes, hiring people, training people, coaching people. So there's something that was continuously a theme. What happened to me personally, I was a few wines down at my best friend's wedding in Australia, and my best friend was a cybersecurity recruiter in London. And he was like kind of giving me the 101 about what are you going to do next with your life? Because you hit a glass ceiling when you work for corporates. Well, I did anyways, because you get to a point, you're earning nice money. You've kind of felt like you've achieved a lot. There's a lot of politics and there's a lot of internal mediation that you have to become used to. And I'm bundles of energy and excitement. So he said to me, I don't know why you haven't just gone into agency recruitment. It blows my mind. You've always done this internal people optimization, customer success, and you've done hiring for big companies, but why not get in and just go in and do recruitment? So I was like, you know what? Couple of wines down. This is interesting. I think I should definitely pursue this. And where else to do recruitment in London? And so I was like, okay, how am I going to do this? And then he said, I've got two of the best Rec2Recs in London. I'm going to introduce you to them. They've placed me throughout all my roles. They're some of the two most wonderful people you'll ever meet. They know the market, and you know them also well as well, who I'm referring to, Sue. Really inspiring and amazing Rec2Recs, right? I think both Andy and Luke are just fabulous. So I met Andy, and as any good recruiter does, was like, let's just build and scale a Rec2Rec business together. I think from your background in managing operations and managing teams and always emphasizing on the customer journey, if you can move that into the recruitment world, I think you're going to do really well. Because I don't know how you feel, Suze, but I think there's something that I constantly hear within the Rec2Rec world is people just don't listen enough to the customer journey. They don't listen to their candidates, or they're not listening to clients. And I think if we just applied a little bit of like customer centric nurture around the recruitment process, there's so much opportunity to be had in our space.
It's so true. And I think one thing that comes up, and it came up in the other episodes that we've done recently, is how difficult people find it to listen, right? You go to your first sales training session and they say, right, we're going to do listening today. And you see the salespeople, they roll their eyes and they're like, don't teach me how to listen. I know what listening is. And actually, very few people do it. And there's loads on this. I mean, we've had Gina Tramarco talking about improv and stuff like this, about how when people are talking, we often think about what are we going to say next instead of actually tuning into what they're saying. It's so interesting. But what I'll stop you about that. Your story is so fascinating to me, because there's one word that comes to mind with little knowledge that I have of you. And that word is gutsy. I think you're very gutsy. I think there's so many people see change as a bad thing, as a risk. And we know, because we work in recruitment, right? We're often trying to tempt people to change their lives because we think that it could be better for them. But there's that fear, that caveman, you know, if I leave the cave, I will get eaten by something, or I will potentially lose my tribe, which I belong to. And it's in our brains, so we can't get away from it. So I want to know, how did Tiarna get away from that kind of amygdala in the brain, safe space, want to have the guts to make changes?
Yeah, I love that word, gutsy. It has so much grit to it. I'd say I would never look at myself as being gutsy, which is so interesting you say it, because for me, it was good things come when you're outside your comfort zone. And that's something that I've always been a believer in, right? I never looked at the decisions I made as, sometimes I was like, okay, that was quite bold. Like I rocked up to Costa Rica with not speaking Spanish with a backpack on, like that. Some people think that's kind of crazy. And my parents thought I was crazy. They tried to hide my passport or whatever else. So there is like an element of, maybe I'm just a little crazy. I'm one of the crazy ones, but I think it was more just, I grew up with, I think my father ran his own business, and I was always surrounded by risk takers around me, whether it was my friends were all very quite ambitious. My sisters are all ambitious in their own way. So everyone I've always surrounded myself, I think, around has been perhaps gutsy or took risks. And whenever I was not taking risks or perhaps being what you would call gutsy, I would just get bored, if I'm honest. And I think there's like an element of when you get over the fear of taking yourself from one situation to another, which can be damn hard and it's a psychological battle at times. When you're in on the other side of it, it's so fulfilling and it's so rewarding.
Yes.
And I get so much energy by it, right? And then people you meet in those situations because you're out of your comfort zone, whether it's your career, whether it's a country, whether it's your job, I
The
learned so
comfort
much.
blanket. Yeah, no, definitely. I always think
Yeah.
of it like being in a jacuzzi, right? You never want to
So
get into the swimming pool because it's too cold after being in the
yeah.
jacuzzi. But once you're in, there's so much more space and you can swim around and all sorts. But you have to make that first leap into the
Yeah.
swimming pool first. But it's so interesting. I
Yeah.
know how much you must know about recruiting because
Yeah.
I'm quite niche. As you know, I work very much in the
Mhm.
education sector, but you work across different sectors. And I'm
I do.
curious to know, in your opinion,
Mm.
if someone's going into recruitment new for the first time,
Mhm.
I'm just going to ask it straight. Where can they earn the big bucks?
Oh, wow. I love this one. Well,
Because I don't know the answer to that. I'm curious to know if you do.
yeah. Do you know what? I think it's a great question. I love it. I think it comes with a couple of complexities, right? Because I think if you're chasing the money, I think money's great. We're all in recruitment because we're chasing the money, right? That's probably a fact for most of us. And I think money is an important driver. But I think what I'm starting to see and hear a lot more now of is I think firstly, you've got to enjoy what you do in whatever market you recruit for. And I think where I can give an example to that is when I started in Rec to Rec, I was literally everywhere. I'm talking to public sector, I'm talking to tech, finance, pharma, HR, change transformation. Like I was everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think at a certain point, I was like, well, hold on a minute. Who do I connect to? Because people, as you probably might notice, I'm curious to your thoughts on this, is people tend to be very similar to the people they recruit for in a weird way, is what I understand. I was finding myself not really being excited by some of the topics that I was talking about with some of the markets. And then all of a sudden, I changed my focus to just like, okay, I've worked in HR, I know HR, and I love my HR candidates and clients. Like they're me. I classify some of them as my friends now, you know. What I find is to kind of, in a roundabout way to answer your question, I think finding what you love recruiting will bring the money and make the big bucks. If you don't like what you're recruiting, you're not going to make money in it and you're actually not going to build relationships in it. So there's a lot of talk at the moment. And I think if I was to look outside and tell someone who hasn't been in recruitment and wants to join, find a market that will weather storms. So when we are going through recessions and we are having downturns, what market often is resilient and bounces back, but also look at where money's being invested. Like if we look at machine learning, if we look at AI, if we look at sustainability, ESG, they're all really, really lucrative markets. But if you're not
Yeah.
interested in machine learning, you're not going to make money in it, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
If
Well, it's
that's
a
that
good
make
point.
my
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, there is that. I mean, you also have in COVID, for example, a lot of people thought
Mm.
healthcare was a very secure place to be. But then the
Yeah.
average fee in healthcare
Mm.
generally is lower than, say, private equities. I'm just trying to think
Yeah.
now, where have I seen the highest average fees? I would say, from my perspective, I've seen quite high fees in senior legal,
Oh
that
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
realm, and finance, but I can't pinpoint. I know change and transformation, there's some huge billers in change and transformation.
That search world as well, right? So once you start getting into search, and I have quite a few exceptional search clients and candidates, and their deal sizes start, they won't touch anything under 60K. That's
Yeah.
where they
Yeah.
start. But that process for them, they can be in a process for 9 to 10 months.
Yeah.
So if you're a really fast-paced, energetic person that doesn't have patience, like that's not going to work for you. You need to find something that's that happy medium where you're working on more senior roles exclusively retained, but maybe not at that really, really C-suite level of the market. I think you're right. There's so much money in private equity at the moment. There's a lot of money and a lot of my clients that do, I think if I look at my clients that do really well, it's anything within private equity, insurance,
Yeah.
tech is just continuously growing,
Mad, isn't it?
expanding, which is
Yeah.
exciting.
And it's true what you say about search. I mean, retained is something that a lot of people see as a very scary word, but we could do a whole podcast on retained. What
Yeah.
I'm curious to know is one of the things that I've noticed recently
Mm.
is you kind of become a bit desensitized to the whole interview process. So I'm speaking to candidates,
Oh,
they're
yeah.
like, oh, any tips for interviews? And you probably get the same too. And you kind of, oh, no, you'll be great. You'll do really well. Don't
It's so
worry.
true.
But I'm curious to know if you were a candidate tomorrow, and
Yeah.
let's rewind, you've come to London, you're looking for
Mhm.
your first recruitment role. What would you
Mm.
say to yourself? What should you do in an interview to be the best version of yourself?
I do love this question because you're so right, by the way. We become so desensitized. And sometimes I feel like I'm just saying the same thing over and over again. And that often loses its impact and delivery with some candidates. I'm like, hold on, stop. This person hasn't interviewed in 10 years. They haven't been through the process. We're talking about it all day, every day. They haven't. So I love this topic. And do you know what it is? It's the basics, isn't it? I think we all go on and on and on about you can overcomplicate a recruitment process and then create such a fear, or you build up this imposter syndrome that we all have. I know I have it massively. And then it becomes this big, crazy, scary conversation, or you end up fumbling because you're overthinking it. But the elements that I like to suggest are pretty much the same across almost all of my candidates. Different levels, it varies, but any level really. It's do your research. It's so basic, but look at the LinkedIn profile of the person that you're actually interviewing, understand where they come from, what's their background, understand about the business. I think what a lot of clients often do, and I've had it recently with feedback rounds, is they'll ask a random question to the candidate just about their business. Like, oh, do you know how many people we have? You kind of need to know that because you will look a bit silly, unfortunately, if you don't have that information at the top of your head. So it's the research around the person interviewing you. It's the research around how you're feeling in your market at the moment and what's coming through from, unfortunately, candidates that are getting rejected. It's the lack of ability to articulate your business development strategy.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah,
Everyone
you
can
also
say, yeah, I do business development, but what does that mean? Put it into
and
a
talk me
strategy.
through that. Yeah.
Yes,
And I think
so
what
true.
happens is I deal with more experienced recruiters that have got more, like years of experience. So they assume that the person interviewing them knows they know how to do business development. But
Yes.
actually, the company that's interviewing you, they don't know you. They
Yeah.
don't know your business development strategy. So you've got to talk them through it and give examples. I think giving examples of clients that you've brought on, how you brought them on. Like, did you send them flowers to their office? Did you call the hiring manager on the switchboard and try and get an interview through dropping a name or whatever it was? Like, you've really got to show how you stood out against the others and
Yes.
be confident, I think, and just owning your experience. And if you haven't had a great year, I just had this morning with someone actually, and we were talking about, would you hire someone based on numbers or someone that's honest? And if someone's got good numbers, yeah, great, you know your numbers. But if you've had a crappy year, just own it and say, like, it's been tough, but this is what I've
Yes.
been doing. Don't lie. That's another one that I'll emphasize here is
Yeah. And
don't
it's
lie.
okay. People, you might
Yeah.
assume that people are judging you, whether it's something on your DBS or whether it's,
Yeah.
maybe you had a performance issue because you
Yeah.
felt bored and you want a new
True.
opportunity because you don't want to, they're not always going to look on it in a bad way, right? So it's
So true.
100% agree with that. What do
Yeah.
people wear? People always say, should I wear suit and tie? How do you think, are we old fashioned still? Do we like people to dress smart? I know
I
what
think
I,
I'm a little
yeah.
bit old fashioned because if you look good, you feel good, right? And this is
Yes.
what I say. Like, if my candidates want to wear heels and dress up, be classy, feel nice, but don't be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So I think suits are dying out a little bit. You walk around London now and not as many people are in suits as they were 11 years ago here.
No. So
Um,
true. It's
so
so
that's
true.
interesting. Yeah. You don't want to overdress, but I think you want to be comfortable in what you're wearing and also
Mm.
read the room and look at like, this is my job, right? To know the culture of the business that you're interviewing. And if there are jeans and a kind of t-shirt type of culture, then, I'll let you know that and therefore dress to accordingly. But if they are quite corporate and they are quite suited and booted, then yeah, I would always say dress up a little more so you look good and you land
You want to make an
well.
effort, exactly. And
And
sometimes
you want to
people are
stand
coming
out.
from work. Yeah, sometimes people are coming from work, and that's
Yeah.
fine if you have to be casual. I mean, don't laugh, but I've actually been at a tube station dressing myself for an interview before. And I remember a lady looking at me and she was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm so sorry, I've got an interview. Don't
Oh,
look."
I love that.
And
Yeah.
I could have got arrested. I was like, what was I doing? But you can find a toilet, find somewhere to change. It's okay. Like, or if you're not going to change into something smarter, then I would say just let them know. Because if you just turn up, it just looks a bit poor, I think.
That's so true. You're right. Just let them know. Like, no surprises in any process. If you're going to be late, if you're going to be underdressed, if you've left your heels at home and you're in trainers, whatever it is, just drop a message. But I think actually this is another element that I had a candidate recently who secured a job, and I asked my client, this job has been open for nearly 2 years. Okay. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a really hard to fill role. And I said, why? I know this candidate's exceptional and they're going to do well, but I said, why then? What did they do differently through this process? I said, all the other wonderful candidates that you met. And it was so simple. And literally what she told me is at the end of every interaction, she just sent a message to me, to whoever she met within the team saying, thank you for your time. It was great to meet you. Or it was great to have this conversation. One email, it took 2 minutes. And it
Yes.
surprises me how many people don't do that. And it's such a small gesture just to send a thank you. And it really makes the client feel valued and remember you when you are going through multiple interviews.
100%. It's like, for example, one of my headhunting tips that I always give
Oh,
people
yeah.
is to always pick something from their LinkedIn profile. Just anything. It can be like,
Like
oh,
that.
I love that fact that, I don't know, you play cricket. You were cricket captain at school. Great. That's
Yeah.
so awesome. And then suddenly it's like gem moment when someone just acknowledges something that they've seen. It's so disruptive to what people are like on a daily basis that it makes people remember you just for noticing something small. So I love what you said about like looking at their LinkedIn profile, because you can draw something out and say, oh, I saw that you went to university, I don't know, in Auckland. I've never been to Auckland. What's it like? And it's just a great moment to kind of build rapport with the interviewer. Any other gems that you've got? Or what if you're late? I mean, is lateness a no-no?
Yeah. It happens, right? We're all humans. I think from living in Holland for 7 years, I was awful at time management. But let me tell you one thing, Dutch
Mhm.
don't appreciate being late. So I learned really quickly that you cannot be late. If you're 2 minutes early, you're almost late. So I learned that the hard way because I used to get locked out of meeting rooms because I would be there on 3 o'clock and they're like, no, 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 this meeting started 30 seconds ago.
Oh,
So
really? Knocked
I
out.
really had to adjust my punctuality to a whole new level. And I've kind of become one of those crazy people a little bit now. And I hate being late,
Yeah.
but life happens. I mean, the trains are always down, things happen. I think it does happen. If it happens more than once, maybe we have a problem here. But I think, again, back to what we said earlier, drop a message, try call, apologize, still turn up, and obviously be very like, I'm sorry this happened. But
Yes.
does happen. We're all humans. And I think if anyone looks at someone being late as a issue on the first instant, it can be harsh, but if it's a pattern, then it's a problem.
Exactly. I love that. If it's a pattern, it definitely is a problem. But
Yeah.
one thing, and I know you and I are not alone in recruitment, there'll be a lot of listeners who have this problem too. Sometimes you have those months where you get stuck with those candidates who are brilliant at their art. They're fantastic at what they do, but they're
Yes.
always flirting. And I created this framework, and it's like step number one is like flirting or flattery. I'm
I
flattered
love
that a headhunter
it.
reached out to me. And I'm going to just speak to them and I'm going to see what roles are out there. And I'm going to have chats with these people and just sort of see what could be out there because I feel a bit underappreciated right now. Now, those people, often top of their game, are never going to leave their current role. And it
Or are
takes,
they? Or are
yeah,
they? Dun,
well,
dun.
exactly. And there are many that won't. And that is
Yeah.
because they haven't already tried to negotiate with their current working company
Mm,
a better salary. They've been wanting a better salary. They want to use you as the
yeah.
recruiter to try and negotiate themselves a better salary. So let's come up with some ideas because I bet you come across this too. How can a
Mm.
recruiter or whatever space they're in negotiate with your boss a better salary without having to
This
put a gun to their head?
Yeah, this is a good one. I think this is always, I think for us as Rec to Recs, this is a balancing act, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because what I learned the hard way is I think being honest and actually taking a consultative approach will get you somewhere in the longer term than the shorter term. So we're often looking for quick wins, right? We all are at times, but it doesn't get you
100%.
anywhere. And you can kind of spot these people. You call them the flirters, right? Is that what you call them? The flirters.
Yeah, it's like stage one. I always say it's like flattery. For example, oh, a builder just whistled at me. Oh, he must think I'm good looking. It
He's
doesn't
great.
ever happen anymore, but it did once upon
I
a
see
time. And it's
it.
like, do I want to marry him? No,
Yeah.
but I am very
Yeah.
flattered with the attention.
I like it. Yeah. What I always try to do is I always think about we're in this for the long term and we're building relationships and we are here to consult. Okay. That's fundamentally what I remind myself all day, every day.
Yeah, I
So
love that.
in that instance, I always within my process when I'm qualifying and having conversations with my candidates, and I can sense that there's maybe an issue at work. They're on the fence, they're testing the waters. They're looking for to understand, is there a better commission structure out there? Could I get paid more? Whatever it is, I try and understand, is your only issue right now your basic salary? And if it is, what conversations have you had internally to actually try and say, hey, are you going to pay me more because I've delivered this? And often enough, the conversation hasn't happened, right? It's just,
Mhm.
no, I would never say that to my boss. Why? I'm having this conversation with you. And I'm like, no, but are you actually going to leave if we get you more money? Because what's going to happen is you're going to waste maybe a month of your time interviewing to get to the end of the process. And hey, guess what? Your manager's not going to want to lose you. They're going to give you that salary increase that you asked for. So how about you do yourself and how about you do us all a favor and trust me on this one? Go back to your boss, say, hey, look, I'm not happy about my salary being here. I think I deserve to be here. Is there anything we can do or what I need to do to get there? And then put a plan in place and put timelines against it. Because I think more than enough, I'm sure you hear this, the goalpost gets moved, the goalpost gets moved, the
Yes,
goalpost
yes.
gets moved. And that's damn frustrating. And then that's when we come in and we should be getting people better opportunities, because that's not fair on anyone. But I think if you haven't, as a candidate that we're dealing with, if they haven't had that conversation, that's an alarm bell to me. And I'd prefer to actually guide them back to their boss. And I check in with them 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, a month later, and go, how was the chat? They go, yeah, look, all good. I've got a plan in place. They're going to promote me. I've just got to get to this target. And I'm like, look, well done. Happy days. Let's stay in touch. But if then the story changes, the narrative changes, there's no clear plan, there's no timeline. Well, look, it's time, right? You've tried everything you can. And then I'm confident that when I get you out to a better business, which will pay you what you're worth, we're not going to be faced with a counteroffer because you've done everything you can and there's no surprises. Do you know what I mean?
I think that was so well articulated. You're so right. And I couldn't have put that better myself. I think I think a lot of it is essentially consult, right? That's what we're here to do. And I often help people. I say to them, do you want me to email you telling you that you could get this? And then you can show your boss. I don't mind. It's fine. I'll do it.
That's a great idea.
And then they're like, yes, please. And then they're like, thank you so much. And do you know what? When it doesn't happen, they come straight back to you. But also, I often ask people, what could they do to keep you financially? And they'll say,
I love that
well,
question.
actually, I don't know. And if they say they don't know, you haven't got a candidate in the first place, because essentially there probably is something. But if they say absolutely nothing, then it's free game. But it's gone both ways. Some of the top candidates that I've represented who I never thought I'd get over the line, I have. But how do you negotiate?
They come back to you. They come back, right?
They always come back.
The counteroffers, if you settle for a counteroffer, it's often enough. I hear back from them 8-9 months later, because it's not always about I find it's not always the case, right? There's something else, and there's either culture change, or there's commission changes, or the structures change. So there's always something else, and the money keeps you happy until it doesn't. And then everything else starts to resurface again, which you see. But I think I think as a Rec to Recs, we have such a critical role in playing in terms of consulting for our clients and our candidates on that, and actually being the baseline as to what people should be paying and shouldn't. Like, we have access to all that information. We know what a 300K biller in your sector, being education, should be getting paid. And if you're underpaid, then call it out. You're underpaid. Go speak to your boss, because they should be paying you your worth.
Yeah, but gutsy Tiarna can do that because that's part of your personality. What about those people who don't like confrontation? What advice can we give them to speak up and essentially ask for pay rise? Because there are people with imposter syndrome. I've been there myself.
One of them. Yeah, me too. Yeah.
And they feel so lucky to have their role, but to ask for a pay rise, oh no, that would be embarrassing. So
it is a hard one. Yeah, it is hard. And it's so much easier for us to sit here and say this when we're consulting. And it's when the shoes are like on the other foot and you're in the hot seat and you've been with your boss for 10 years and you're panicking because this is everything and you've got kids and a family. It's really terrifying. Don't get me wrong. It is really tough and it's not an easy conversation to have, but it is one of those band-aid moments. And I think the more you have these conversations and the more of a relationship you build with your manager or your team, it becomes easier. And I think if you approach it from a place of, like, not I deserve this and I want this, because this, you go into it with a very open, honest kind of approach. Humble. And seek to humble. That's exactly the word I'm looking for, actually. Humble, and seek to understand. And people are all humans that go through different cycles of emotion at certain times. So I think if you're nervous about the conversation, you should be, because it's a tough conversation to have and it's not easy, but you need to feel psychologically safe in your workplace to be able to have those conversations, or I would question your workplace culture anyways.
Yeah.
In a way. Yeah. But I think listen to podcasts, right? You've got so many wonderful guests on your podcast that talk through how to have these conversations. But the more you can relate to people that are similar to you, I learn everything through listening to podcasts. Like, I'm obsessed with reading, self-help, learning about new ways of approaching conversations. And I'm not perfect, and none of us are. And I have imposter syndrome because I constantly build things up. But I think you've got to just constantly be around people that are helping you and pushing you, and have a mentor that can help you.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And I think one of the best things to do is, when you go into that meeting, is not just to say, I think I'm worth this because Rec to Recs have offered me this, but document all the great things that you've done, but also document, go to your job description. These are things that you want from someone in this role. This is where I think I'm at. Now, if I'm not, please tell me, but what do I need to do to get a salary increase? Because I don't want to get to the point where I am looking elsewhere, because I love working here. all those things, and then backed up with an email, because sometimes they think
So
that they've
true.
dealt with it and there's that miscommunication, and actually they were going to do it anyway. But just be clear on timelines. If it's not happening now, when will it happen? No one
True.
wants to be left in the dark. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And also, people move on, right? So if all of a sudden your manager leaves and then there's no trace of conversation, you're back to square one. And then that can take time and take time. I think it's something that you will always be faced with in any art of negotiation. We do it all day, every day, but it is challenging when you are in the hot seat. And the more guidance you can get from us, from people that you trust, that's always my answer. Get stern advice from someone that's in your network that you can really rely on as a source.
Yes.
And come with solutions, right? I think I remember when I used to manage large teams, the hardest thing as a manager, being on the other side now, when you've got people coming to you, is when they're constantly coming to you with problems. I used to really respect my teammates that would come with problems, but actually suggest solutions at the same time, because
Yeah.
you can see them working with you and it's not an entitlement conversation. It's, hey, they
Yes.
definitely care and they want the best of their situation. And I can work with that because that's
Yeah.
reasonable. It's not,
So
it's
true.
reasonable to ask
So true.
for more and come with options, not just demand and feel like you're entitled to something.
Yeah. And I always think the number one reason that people are leaving their jobs, and I want to know what you think about this, but the
Yeah.
number one reason that I see is often that communication from the manager to the employee. And I think often when you are interviewing, going back to what we were talking about at the beginning, find out, how will you manage me if I underperform, right? I don't want to
Yeah.
underperform. I'm going to be great. But if I do underperform, how will I be managed? And what support will I get? And what will that look like on a week to week? And ask about their
Mm.
retention, right? No one does
Yeah.
that. No one says, and we all
Mm.
feel a bit cheeky, how many people have left in the last year? You need to know, right? And
You
if so,
do. And I mean,
why?
we have access to LinkedIn, right? You can look at past employees and you can see who was there. And I think that's
Oh,
such a
yeah.
powerful tool that people don't use. It's so true. I think it takes you to a point where people land in jobs and they say often at times, what you hear a lot of is, I was missold and I was overpromised, I was sold. But actually, I think you have a responsibility as someone joining a business to get under the hood and ask those questions to make sure that you are fully aware of what you're going into. Okay, yeah, there's the odd occasion where sometimes the lines can get blurred, which we try and avoid, and we hope doesn't happen often. But
Yeah.
yeah, the questions you just mentioned, you should be understanding, like, what will you give me as support? What does good
Yes.
look like? What tools do you have for me to be successful? And how will I become a 600-700K biller in your business?
Brilliant
And
open questions.
yeah,
Brilliant open questions.
it's
Everyone
so
should ask those questions.
yeah, indeed. I think people are scared of those questions at times, and I get it. I think on both sides, you walk away and no one's discussed what they build. It's like, it's money can be sensitive and it can be a topic that people don't like to talk about. But if it's out there in the open and you just address it, it's the elephant in the room, right? We're all thinking
So
it, just
true.
say it. So,
So true. No, there's so many golden nuggets there. I'm going to finish with one question because I think it's really
oh,
important, because you and I both know, and actually our very good friend Luke doesn't like to use the word rec to rec, but let's face it, we are rec to recs. We're search consultants in the world of whatever you want to call us. We are best known as rec to rec. And it can be a bit of a dirty word, like,
yeah.
even from recruiters themselves, as we've seen recently on LinkedIn, it's that, oh, rec to recs, the bane of our life. Now, that is a huge thing, and that there are a lot of people out there giving rec to rec a bad name. So what would you say to the recruiters out there who want to make a decision as to which rec to rec they work with, because they've got a lot of choice?
They do have a lot of choice. And I was just thinking as you were saying that, should we try and find another word for it to rebrand our industry? Because it has got some tarnished reputation to it at
Yeah.
times. But no, in all seriousness, what would
Rebranded
I,
by being excellent.
yeah, yeah, that's what we could call ourselves. What I would say is, I think you've got to trust your person you're working with. And I think there's a lot of expectation setting on both sides. My approach and how I work is, I meet everyone and I will, if I don't meet you in person, I'm going to have a video call with you and I'm going
Love
to
that.
build a relationship. I'm going to understand how you would like to work with me. And I'm going to show you how I often work with people. I think it's important that you trust the person you're working with because they're representing you and we're in your corner, by the way. And I think that's often can be lost in the process. Is, I'm your recruiter, I'm your consultant, I'm here to help you and I'm here to get you the best possible job that there is and the best possible offer, and everything you share with me is to benefit you. And I think
Yes.
anyone that you don't sense that sincerity or that honesty from, or if you're not getting messages back, or if they're saying they'll do one thing and they don't do another, like, why are you working with them? Because you do have a lot of options, like you said.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's an excuse to be sloppy when there is competition. So if you're feeling that the person's ghosting you or the person's decides to spec your CV out to people without your permission, which, let's face it, that unfortunately happens, really unfortunately, then you shouldn't be working with them. But I do believe in karma as well, in a way, when it comes to this, because those people get a name and they get a reputation, and that's actually on them. And I hope that it's not on the whole industry, because there's people like you, there's people like me, there's people like Luke, there's people like Andy. Yeah, there's a list of really great rec to recs out there that do really generally try and partner with their clients and really provide a good level of service with their candidates. So as a candidate, you should qualify your recruitment partner, as we could call them, or consultant, and get to know them and make sure that you're honest with them and make sure they're honest with you. And throughout this whole process, it should just be about honesty, really, and transparency, and be upfront.
Definitely. I love that. So well. But I think like also with, how is your recruiter qualifying the companies that they're choosing to work with? Because I don't know about you, but I am so picky about the clients that I choose to work with, because I feel such shame if they don't look after my candidate. So, and it very, very, touch wood, rarely happens. So I think find out, is it because you don't want to just go to the recruiter who's going to get the best fee for wherever they place you? It's your life. It's your our life is essentially where we spend all of our time, and you'll be spending all your time at work. So yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for your wisdom, by the way. And
so fun.
You have smashed the first podcast that you've done. You should go and host your own. Go and host your own. But no, genuinely, if there are people who are listening to this and they're inspired by you, they want to reach out to you, how can they go about that?
Oh, that would be absolutely so touching. So I would love for you to follow me, like me on LinkedIn. One of my goals this year is to be more like you and to actually build a better online presence and branding, which I'm hoping I'm going to lean on you for. So jump on my LinkedIn page, drop me a message, give me a call. I'm an open book. I love meeting people for coffees, drinks, whatever that may be. So we actually just hosted a recruitment event for the first time for Adamo just recently. And we're going to do more of those coming up, because we found it was such a nice way to bring together clients and candidates just outside of your normal work hours to socialize. So
I love that.
Watch this space. You'll be coming to the next one when you're in London, and we're going to do more events to bring people together, just to build a community, and also just to work with more like-minded people, just because together we can achieve more, I think, as a whole and as a collective.
100%. Yeah, I completely agree. Awesome. Well, thank you very much. And yeah, I look forward to catching up with you as always now, almost every day. But yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.